In the dead of night, the seemingly tranquil Caribbean erupted. Venezuelan warships, out of the blue, unleashed a surprise attack. The peaceful darkness was shattered by fiery red columns. Alarms blared across the military port. Sailors scattered in panic, but it was too late. The blow had already landed. The assault, carried out by the U.S. Navy, was directed from an unexpected source. Spearheaded by President Donald Trump, a Venezuelan military base, once Maduro's pride, was reduced to little more than rubble. Was this merely a warning or a declaration of a new order in the Western Hemisphere? Modern firepower illuminated the Caribbean waters in the early hours of that fateful night. Russian imported anti-aircraft radar, installed in Venezuela years ago, was completely neutralized within minutes. Tomahawk cruise missiles, launched from over 1,000 kilometers away, streaked across the sea. The outdated electronic warfare systems couldn't even detect them. The strikes were surgically precise, as if programmed for a long time, hitting ammunition depots, command centers, and coastal defense missile launch sites. What caused Venezuela to collapse so quickly? It was the overwhelming technological superiority of the United States. Above, American F-35 Lightning II fighter jets, invisible to Venezuela's old radar systems thanks to their stealth technology, soared through the sky. Within 15 minutes, 4 precision-guided bombs found their mark. A JDAM bomb breached the concrete shell of the weapons storage at the Puerto Cabello Naval Base. A deafening explosion followed, turning the entire area into an inferno. This overwhelming power stemmed directly from Trump's resolute decision. Just days earlier, during an emergency White House meeting, Trump had declared that Maduro could no longer be allowed to threaten regional security. He unequivocally stated that the Caribbean could not become a staging ground for hostile nations targeting the U.S. His words transformed into action on that stormy, fiery night. The U.S. Navy's Fourth Fleet, responsible for the entire South American and Caribbean region, was at the forefront. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers launched the initial volleys of Tomahawk missiles. Each missile, traveling at nearly 1,000 kilometers per hour, skimmed the sea's surface, constantly altering its trajectory to evade interception. Within seconds, they all slammed into their targets. The entire base was rocked by continuous explosions, visible in satellite imagery. Venezuela's naval forces found themselves in a crisis no one could prevent. The ocean's surface reflected a fiery red, mirroring the despair in the eyes of its warriors. Why did the United States choose this moment? Washington's long-term strategy provides the answer. In recent months, U.S. intelligence revealed that Russia and China were secretly supporting Venezuela. Radar and anti-aircraft missile systems were being discreetly shipped in. Maduro had transformed Puerto Cabello into a hub for anti-U.S. military operations right on America's doorstep. Had this plan succeeded, it would have controlled maritime routes from the Atlantic into the Gulf of Mexico. Donald Trump clearly understood that a swift end required only one decisive approach. And so, the Caribbean burned that night. From a strategic standpoint, it's clear the U.S. didn't just aim to destroy infrastructure. They intended to cripple Venezuela's capacity to fight from the outset. The destruction of radar systems meant Venezuela was blind. The detonation of ammunition depots rendered remaining warships useless, mere steel hulks. The collapse of command centers severed all communication and command. This is the art of modern American warfare, a precise, preemptive strike at the opponent's most vulnerable points, leaving them unable to retaliate. Yet Venezuela's response was minimal. Outdated anti-aircraft guns fired into the sky, but not a single shot found its mark on the F-35s. The U.S. Air Force had already claimed the skies. Venezuela's once proud Su-30 fighter jets, upon takeoff, were quickly neutralized. In mere minutes, the U.S. controlled the entire Caribbean airspace. Perhaps the most chilling aspect was Washington's complete silence following the attack, more so than the sheer power displayed. There was no immediate official statement, only images of missiles in flight, flames blazing in the night, and the thunderous roar of explosions serving as the message. The most potent message was the silence itself. Today we face this question. Was this merely a warning to Maduro or the beginning of a new era where the U.S. is ready to use force to reestablish order in the Western Hemisphere? In Donald Trump's presidency, a hardline approach is highly probable. The fiery Caribbean night, a testament to the power of the world's most advanced weaponry, serves as stark evidence. After that first night, the Caribbean was ablaze. The world now eagerly awaits the U.S.'s next move. While a preemptive strike can serve as a warning to compel an adversary's submission, Washington must demonstrate its ability to control the entire battlefield, and it did so swiftly. The U.S. Navy's Fourth Fleet initiated Phase 2 of the operation, directly guided from the Pentagon. This wasn't just about Tomahawk missiles or precision bombs from F-35s, but a comprehensive display of America's technological might. From the flight deck of the USS George Washington FA-18E Super Hornets launched in rapid succession, their jet engines leaving brilliant streaks of light against the Caribbean night. Following them were the EA-18G Growler electronic warfare squadrons, their sole purpose to cripple Venezuela's radar, communication, and fire control systems. While familiar with American electronic warfare technology from conflicts in the Middle East and Africa, its deployment in the Caribbean yielded even more terrifying results. The entire system was jammed within minutes. Venezuela's air defenses were rendered blind. Their S-125 Pechora missile systems, relics from the Soviet era, were useless. Screens displayed only faint, flickering static, making it impossible to distinguish decoys from actual targets. Meanwhile, over 500 kilometers offshore, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers simultaneously launched a second wave of Tomahawk missiles. Each missile flew low over the water, weaving like a steel serpent, evading all interception attempts. The remaining radar stations succumbed within minutes. Military ports and logistics depots continued to explode in a sea of fire. The flawless coordination between U.S. forces and F-35s, providing real-time targeting data, and destroyers launching Tomahawks based on constantly updated coordinates was remarkable. Under the ocean's surface, Virginia-class nuclear attack submarines silently patrolled, ready to strike any Venezuelan warship that dared to leave port. Could any other global power achieve such three-dimensional coordination? The answer is no. However, beyond the technical, politics was the main driver. Donald Trump sent a clear message, not just by destroying bases, but by demonstrating America's control over the Caribbean. This was a comprehensive operation designed to neutralize any threat. The first images, broadcast internationally, captured global attention. In response, a Venezuelan Sucre-class frigate attempted to leave port. However, targeting radar from the USS Ross guided missile destroyer locked onto it within minutes. Two RGM-84 Harpoon anti-ship missiles struck the frigate like lightning. One hit the engine room, the other the weapons magazine. Amidst a violent explosion, the massive vessel caught fire, listed heavily, and began to sink. This spectacle caused the remaining Venezuelan naval forces to hesitate. Every commander knew that any ship leaving port faced a similar fate. Why such a vast disparity? It was a generational gap in technology. While Venezuela continued to rely on late 20th century systems, the U.S. had established a network-centric warfare system controlled by artificial intelligence. Supercomputers processed all targeting and trajectory corrections, making U.S. responses twice as fast. A single U.S. officer could simultaneously manage multiple launch platforms and squadrons. While Venezuela still relied on traditional radio waves, Donald Trump understood that victory on the battlefield no longer depended on who had more ships or guns, but on which nation possessed superior technology. Once again, we must ask, could the U.S. so easily dismantle Venezuelan bases? Would any nation dare to confront it directly? Venezuela was reduced to a cornered animal after two successive blows, trapped within America's formidable blockade. Puerto Cabello base was destroyed, the naval fleet crippled, and the Air Force decimated within hours. Nicolas Maduro sat in the Miraflores Palace in Caracas, silently staring at screens displaying images of burning coastal cities. He understood, yet could not admit defeat. Maduro quickly convened a cabinet and military command meeting. Heated arguments ensued in the Grand Room. Surrender advocates pleaded for their lives, while hardliners demanded an uncompromising stance. However, the destruction of the planned munitions stockpile rendered everything hopeless. With demoralized troops and neutralized radar, Maduro's only option was to appeal for aid. He immediately ordered secure lines to Moscow and Beijing. His desperate plea for help went unanswered. Russia and China could not allow the U.S. to do as it pleased in the Caribbean, but they offered only silence. The Kremlin monitored the situation. According to Russian advisors, Venezuela had lost over 70% of its military capacity in just 2 years. The Russian president understood that any direct military intervention in the Western Hemisphere would be suicidal, given the geographical distance, U.S. naval power, and Russia's depleted finances after years of conflict in Europe. Moscow's only response to Maduro was vague promises of considering external support. The situation in Beijing was similar. China had invested billions in Venezuela's oil and gas sector, but hesitated to confront the U.S. directly in what Washington considered its backyard. Chinese generals admitted in closed-door meetings that any move into the Caribbean would quickly make their warships targets for the U.S. Navy. The result? China chose the safe option, maintaining silence and issuing only diplomatic statements calling for restraint. Maduro's silence was equally damning, a political death sentence. Meanwhile, U.S. intelligence revealed documents, satellite imagery, and secret contracts obtained from Puerto Cabello base, shedding light on the truth. Venezuela had quietly allowed Russia and China to establish military logistics facilities on its territory. This plan aimed to create a base for monitoring crucial Caribbean shipping lanes and to pressure the U.S. and its regional allies. Global public opinion exploded when this information was released. Neighboring countries like Brazil and Colombia immediately declared their support for the U.S., stating that Maduro's actions had brought the fire right to their borders and that he would pay the price. With no allies and no support, Maduro found himself isolated in the very region he once boasted about. Venezuela's military was disintegrating. Coastal units retreated into the jungle, abandoning weapons and tanks. Thousands of citizens took to the streets in Caracas, protesting the government. It became clear that Maduro had recklessly initiated an unnecessary war. The squares echoed with chants for peace, with people declaring they did not want to be destroyed by Maduro's ambitions. Facing external and internal pressure, Maduro's desperation grew. He attempted to contact Iran and Cuba, but his efforts were met with the same simple response. We are monitoring the situation. No nation dared to send troops or equipment, knowing they would face direct confrontation with U.S. warships. Why did Russia and China abandon Maduro? Firstly, both understood the U.S.'s absolute dominance in the Caribbean and Washington's zero-tolerance policy for any actions obstructing its interests. Secondly, both Russia and China had their own pressing issues. Russia faced sanctions and ongoing conflict in Eastern Europe. China's priority was maintaining economic stability rather than risking military confrontation. Thirdly, they viewed Maduro as merely a pawn on the global chessboard, expendable once cornered. Consequently, Venezuela was left to face the consequences alone, further amplifying U.S. strength under Trump. Tactically, the U.S. achieved three objectives in a short period. First, they eliminated the military facilities secretly built by Russia and China in Venezuela. Second, they sent a clear message that any nation in the Western Hemisphere daring to defy the U.S. would face similar consequences. Third, they showed Russia and China that their power was insufficient to protect an ally under attack. This was not just a military victory, but a triumph in the realms of psychology, politics, and diplomacy. In press conferences, Pentagon spokespeople emphasized that the operation was not aimed at the Venezuelan people, but at Maduro's militarization of the Caribbean. This narrative made it difficult for international public opinion to criticize the U.S., as it cleverly distinguished between the populace and their government. The Venezuelan people themselves began to grasp the truth. Poverty, economic devastation, and now conflict, all caused by Maduro's reckless ambition. Countless high-ranking generals secretly negotiated with the U.S., pledging non-resistance in exchange for protection of their lives and property. Maduro's grip on power was slipping, even within his own military. Meanwhile, Western media outlets unanimously praised the operation. From coordination capabilities to deployment speed, the Caribbean campaign served as a prime example of modern warfare, showcasing the might of the U.S. military. Many analysts compared this campaign to previous U.S. operations in Iraq and Libya, but technology had elevated everything to a new level. Should the U.S. worry about this scenario playing out in other hotspots? This question arose in numerous global security conferences, fueled by Donald Trump's strong international presence. Trump not only made decisions regarding military matters, but also used the victory in the Caribbean to bolster his political influence. In a post-campaign speech, he stated, "We do not seek war, but we will never allow anyone to threaten freedom in our own backyard." The recent Caribbean night demonstrated that Maduro's reliance on Russia and China to challenge the U.S. was a miscalculation. This statement had a swift impact. Partners like Colombia, Brazil, Chile, and Argentina expressed their support, recognizing that only the U.S. could protect the region. The promises of Russia and China ultimately amounted to little more than vague assurances. In his final days, virtually abandoned, Maduro attempted to instigate anti-U.S. protests. However, tens of thousands of citizens took to the streets demanding his resignation. The military refused to intervene, and riot police were divided, plunging Caracas into chaos. The final image broadcast to the world was of a solitary, exhausted Venezuelan president in a bunker, making desperate phone calls that went unanswered. Russia remained silent, China said nothing, and Iran offered only mild statements. Maduro realized Cuba's opposition and understood the game was over. The biggest question now is not whether Venezuela will survive, but whether Donald Trump will leverage this victory for his next strategic move. The U.S. had demonstrated that it possessed the world's most advanced weaponry and the political will to use it when necessary. Despite the pronouncements of Russia and China, they ultimately yielded to overwhelming power. Was this the beginning of a new era, with the U.S. redrawing the lines of acceptable behavior? Would any power that once dreamed of challenging American influence dare to try again? The answer may emerge in the next phase of the campaign. After days of fiery storms, the Caribbean calmed. However, black smoke continued to rise from the Venezuelan bases. The U.S. had won, a fact that was undeniable. On the foundation of this victory, Donald Trump also delivered a message to Caracas and the world. He spoke with a firm yet measured tone. America does not seek war, but we will never stop advancing. We have proven that those who seek to endanger human freedom will pay the price. Moreover, the price is destruction. This was a declaration of strategy rather than mere words, marking America's opening of a new approach to both the Western Hemisphere and the global order. In the days following the campaign's conclusion, global public opinion on the Caribbean was divided. One side acknowledged and admired America's comprehensive power. The other side harbored fear, even anger, from nations that had once aspired to challenge Washington. NATO allies in Europe felt a sense of relief, recognizing that despite ongoing debates, the U.S. remained the sole security anchor capable of protecting them. South American nations like Colombia, Brazil, and Chile publicly supported U.S. actions, understanding that Maduro had turned the Caribbean into a dangerous region without Washington's intervention. Conversely, Moscow and Beijing remained silent. Russia's embarrassment was evident in its inability to protect a previously supported ally. Meanwhile, China, accused of planning to expand its strategic influence through Venezuela, retreated upon witnessing America's display of power. What did this disparity reveal? Only that the U.S. was a nation that dared to act. Militarily, the Caribbean conflict was a turning point. It was no longer a conventional war between two large armies, but a testament to modern warfare doctrine. Preemptive strikes, rapid deployment, overwhelming technology, and political resolve. International military experts observed that the U.S. achieved three strategic effects in this short campaign. A swift strike that completely devastated the local adversary, Venezuela. A clear notification to aspiring powers focused on the Western Hemisphere, and a boost in allied confidence that the U.S., under Donald Trump's leadership, remained the sole nation capable of safeguarding global order. Donald Trump understood that military victory alone was insufficient. A political message was also essential. In a press conference, he declared that the Caribbean was just the beginning. Wherever freedom is threatened, we will be there. America possessed modern technology, and a resolute spirit was its most powerful weapon. These words seemed to serve as a direct warning to Maduro and nations that had previously supported corrupt endeavors. Russia with its military bases in Eastern Europe, China with its ambitions in the South China Sea and Africa, and Iran with its destabilizing activities in the Middle East. Everyone recognized the clear message from Washington. The notable aspect was Donald Trump's use of soft power after achieving victory. He relied not only on firepower, but also on the image of a decisive America capable of rapid response. He replaced Washington's previous silence with a U.S. ready to fight for its core interests. Following the Caribbean campaign, a U.S. public opinion poll showed a surge in support for Donald Trump. Americans viewed him as a president of action who affirmed America's strength. For them, it was proof that the U.S. remained on top. Meanwhile, the situation in Venezuela worsened. Popular uprisings grew as the military gradually lost control. Many high-ranking generals secretly pledged to negotiate with the U.S., if their lives and assets were protected. Maduro's loss of control was merely a matter of time. Furthermore, Donald Trump issued a symbolic statement. The U.S. was not occupying Venezuela. We are not here to plunder or impose rules. We are here to remove threats and restore freedom to the people. This message resonated deeply with millions of Venezuelans. They began marching with American flags, chanting slogans in support of Trump. It was an unforeseen image. On the streets of Caracas, a U.S. president was being hailed. The question before the global community was this the beginning of a new era of Trump's foreign policy? Unlike previous U.S. presidents who often hesitated and deliberated, Donald Trump acted swiftly. Where Washington once relied on alliances, Trump now demonstrated that American victory was still assured. Moreover, while previous U.S. military power had been questioned, the Caribbean proved that America still possessed superior technology and the resolve to overcome any adversary. During discussions at the United Nations, some nations expressed concern that the U.S. had opened a dangerous Pandora's box, but no one could deny the significance of the Caribbean campaign. America's adversaries, China remained silent, Iran appeared weak, and Cuba evaded direct debate. This indicated that the world had tacitly acknowledged Donald Trump's new red line. International military scholars term this the Caribbean effect, an impact where the U.S. not only won on the battlefield, but also in the psychological battle. Now, any threat against the U.S. must be carefully considered, knowing that crossing that line would result in consequences similar to what Maduro faced. Donald Trump used this victory to advance his new defense agenda, requesting increased budgets for the Air Force, Navy, and artificial intelligence programs for the military. He declared that data and technology, not just bombs and guns, would drive 21st century warfare, enabling decisions that would keep the U.S. ahead of its rivals for at least 2 generations. This move excited U.S. defense technology companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman, all competing to create next-generation weapon systems. This cycle further widened the gap between the U.S. and the rest of the world. However, a more critical question remains. Did the victory in the Caribbean make the world safer or more dangerous? Donald Trump's decisive action prevented an immediate threat, averting Venezuela's fall into Russian and Chinese hands. However, for nations opposing the U.S., it served as a stark warning that Washington was prepared to use military force at any moment. Regardless of the perspective, the undeniable truth was that the U.S. had forged a new reputation, one that no one dared to ignore without risking destruction. Donald Trump addressed the media after the Caribbean campaign concluded with a brief statement. This is a victory of will, technology, and faith in American strength. And for anyone who still doubts, go to Caracas. This statement echoed globally. The Caribbean became a symbol of a new era in global security policy, an era where the U.S., under Donald Trump's leadership, was not only defensive, but also ready to strike to enforce inviolable red lines. The question facing us after the collapse of the Caribbean is, who will dare challenge the U.S. now? Thank you for watching our full analysis of the war situation. If you're passionate about geopolitics, military strength, and the global battlefield from a military perspective, you'll enjoy this channel. Remember to subscribe.